Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Trumbore with your nightly review for Wednesday, May 15, and it is 4:02 p.m. Eastern Time. Dow Jones closed up again, 59 points, 60 points, 0.4% to 15,275. S&P 500 up 8 points, 0.5% to 1658. NASDAQ up 9 points to 3471. Gold closed at $13.91, down $33. Oil is at $94.30, and the 10-year Treasury 1.95%. Today being Wednesday, Bull Bear Day, the bulls are up to 54.2, bears 19.8. That's a huge spread, normally a danger sign, but it has not been this year. Producer price index for April, down 0.7%, but ex-food and energy up 0.1%. The core rate is up 1.7% year over year. Industrial production for April down 0.5%, the worst reading in 8 months. And a New York area reading on manufacturing was putrid. But today, the Congressional Budget Office released new deficit projections, and it has it coming in for this fiscal year ending September 30 at $642 billion from a previous projection of $845 billion. Versus 1.1 trillion for last year, which was 7% of GDP, which is not good. But the deficit is now projected to be 4% of GDP in 2013, 3.4% in 2014, and just 2.1% in fiscal 2015. So the pressure on the White House and Congress to find a solution to the longer-term debt woes is lessened big time. Entitlement reform? No way. They'll both take the easy way out. From a piece by Greg Sargent in the Washington Post today, the Monica Lewinsky scandal may have helped save Social Security in the late 1990s. Now the scandal fever currently gripping Washington, IRS, Benghazi, Associated Press phone records may save Social Security and Medicare 2 decades later. Liberals who are dreading the scandal mania that is taking hold should note that it contains a potential upside. It could make a grand bargain that includes cuts to Medicare and Social Security benefits, even less likely than it already is. That's because when scandal grips Washington, a president actually needs his core supporters more than ever to ward it off, making it harder to do anything that will alienate them. Indeed, some leading liberals and labor officials are hoping this proves to be the case if the scandals continue. We don't know what's going to happen with this scandal talk. Mike Lux, a leading progressive strategist who fought in the Clinton impeachment wars, tells me. But one thing I do know from the Clinton years is that presidents need their bases completely fired up and fighting for them when the scandal stuff hits. Anything that President Obama does to alienate the base, like cutting Medicare and Social Security, would hurt him badly when he needs the base to the maximum. The scandal talk makes a grand bargain less likely. I've been writing about that before the scandals hit, that if we didn't tackle entitlement reform this year, forget it. There won't be any talk about it until after the 2016 election. Well, the improvement in the deficit is a result of increased tax revenues, about roughly $100 billion of the $200 billion difference from 845 to 642. And then, very importantly, you have the housing rebound that has allowed Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to make massive dividend payments to the Treasury, which over the course of the fiscal year will be about 95 to 100 billion as well. The debt ceiling issue is thus now pushed off until possibly November. The bottom in the projected deficit is now 2015, when it had originally been forecast at 430 billion and is now forecast at 378 billion again for fiscal 2015, before rising anew on the entitlement issue. Net interest expense, however, is not projected to come down that much. In the year 2022, which is what I've been focusing on, in a normalized interest rate environment, now the CBO is projecting a net interest expense of still 764 billion. The old projection was 795. I'm going to work up some diagrams for you, maybe tomorrow. In the Eurozone, GDP contracted 0.2% in the first quarter, the sixth straight quarter of contraction, longer than the 2008-09 recession. The ECB's accommodative monetary policy has led to higher stock markets and stabilized debt markets, but the real economy, especially in the southern tier, continues to suffer, particularly small and medium-sized businesses that are suffering with the ongoing credit crunch. French GDP fell 0.2% in the first quarter, worse than expected, on top of down 0.2 in Q4, so it's back in recession for the French, the first recession in 4 years. In Germany, the GDP rose, but only 0.1%. Fourth quarter was revised down in Germany to a contraction of 0.7. Their figures are quarter over quarter. One thing, Europe did have a brutal winter. I don't like using weather as an excuse, but Europe does have an excuse as far as the winter impacting the numbers somewhat. Italy's first quarter GDP contracted 0.5% after falling 0.9 in the fourth quarter. Industrial production in Italy also fell 0.8% in March. Spain, first quarter GDP down 0.5%. Netherlands, first quarter GDP down 0.1%. It's sick. It's a sick economy. The EU, European Union 27 nations, also had a contraction of 0.1% in the first quarter. So that's a lot of numbers for you. Tokyo's Nikkei closed today at 15,096, up another 2.3%. The yen is at a 4.5-year low against the dollar. The Nikkei index is up 46% this year, and about 60% since Abe was elected over there. Excuse me, I have all my CBO projection. I read the whole CBO analysis, and again, I'll give you more tomorrow. There was a piece of good news in Greece today. Fitch cut Greece's rating to CCC from B- last May of 2012, but yesterday they reversed the cut, a sign that while Greece is still far, far from recovery, the country is going in the right direction. And all you need to know is how much Greece's bonds have rallied. The Greek 10-year bond had a yield of about 30% a year ago. Today it traded at 8.65%. Some big, big money in the hedge fund community has been made in Greek paper just as it was made in Irish paper a while back. Greece does remain highly risky. Well, last night I wrote in the caption for the nightly review how Obama's second term was at risk of going up in flames. So today's Wall Street Journal, controversies threaten President's agenda. An outburst of controversies threatens to swamp President Barack Obama's second-term agenda while giving Republicans new opportunities to galvanize their base ahead of the battle for control of Congress in the 2014 election. For Mr. Obama, one political danger is that Republicans see the prospect of gains in the 2014 elections as more important than working with the administration on such common goals as an agreement on deficit reduction, tax reform, and changes to Medicare, Social Security, and other entitlement programs. Just as yours truly has been saying for a long time, this idea that Obama had only 6 or 8 months to get anything done, that meme is beginning to build, said said Matt Bennett, a vice president of Third Way, a Democratic group. It fuels the idea that this is going to run out the clock on any real chance for progress on any of his agenda items. Representative Bruce Braley, a Democrat running for Senate in Iowa, sent a letter Monday to Mr. Obama demanding the president request the immediate resignation of Lois Lerner, the IRS official who oversees the part of the agency that singled out Tea Party and conservative groups for extra attention. That's a Democrat running for Senate. You're going to see a ton of this as they run away from their president. Republicans are riding high on the scandal news. If there was ever something that's going to motivate the base and get conservative activists riled up, it's going to be the IRS targeting conservatives in the Tea Party, said Brad Dayspring of the National Republican Senatorial Committee. Editorial, Washington Post, on the issue of the seizure of the Associated Press's phone records. In a letter to AP President and CEO Gary B. Pruitt yesterday, Deputy Attorney General James Cole explained that the department had no alternative means of gathering essential information. He also intimated that Justice had kept AP in the dark until a few days ago so as to avoid a substantial threat to the integrity of the investigation. Attorney General Eric Holder, who recused himself from the investigation after he was interviewed by the FBI, fleshed that assertion out at a press conference Tuesday, saying at issue is one of the top 2 or 3 most serious leaks that I have ever seen, which put the American people at risk, and that is not hyperbole. Perhaps that's so. We have no independent means of verifying Mr. Holder's claim, though we hope reporters are working on it. As Mr. Pruitt responded Tuesday, we held that story until the government assured us that the national security concerns had passed. Indeed, the White House was preparing to publicly announce that the bomb plot had been foiled. The usual reason for keeping a subpoena secret is that the target would otherwise try to destroy documents. In this case, AP could not have done so even if it wanted to, since the relevant records were in the possession of its phone service providers. Without even giving AP a chance to weigh in, we don't see how the department could intelligently weigh its prosecutorial needs against this broad subpoena's chilling effect on reporters and their sources, as the Washington Post. From USA Today, in the 27 months that the Internal Revenue Service put a hold on all Tea Party applications for nonprofit status, it approved applications from similar liberal groups, a USA Today review of IRS data shows. As applications from conservative groups sat in limbo, groups with obviously liberal names were approved in as little as 9 months, with names including words like progress or progressive. These groups applied for the same tax status and were engaged in the same kinds of activities as the conservative groups. That was USA Today. Finally, and what may be a more significant development than the White House scandals, there was a deeply disturbing piece in the New York Times by Thomas Erdbrink on the threats against 2 Iranian presidential candidates I discussed on Monday. Ali Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani, the former president, and Esfandiar Mashai, the top aide to current President Ahmadinejad. Iran's National Deputy Police Commander was quoted by the newspaper Shard as issuing a warning to President Ahmadinejad and Mr. Mashai that the shedding of blood is allowed if they do not stop claiming to take their orders from the Shiite Messiah. The message, wrapped in ideological and religious wording, is the strongest indication yet that Mr. Ahmadinejad's faction could be purged after or even during the elections. Also, the top editor of the country's influential state-run newspaper wrote of Mr. Rafsanjani that he was a representative for the American-Israeli sedition of 2009, referring to the protests that erupted after the last presidential elections, which were considered fraudulent. Those in power widely accused the former president, Rafsanjani, of engineering the demonstrations and say he is therefore unfit to lead the country. The same editor wrote of Mr. Ahmadinejad that he is suicidal. The editor predicted that the president is preparing to create unrest in case Mr. Mashai is not allowed to run. Remember, the Guardian Council will issue a final list in another week or so. This is about Israel, though Erdbrink doesn't note this. If the hardliners win, the Ayatollah's chosen candidate, then of course the nuclear program continues. Israel is sitting back. Notice how quiet on this front they've been, waiting to see how the election goes and whether or not a figure with whom the West can deal with emerges. If not, a military strike is on the way, and I imagine if Rafsanjani is not allowed to run, the people are going to hit the streets. This could get interesting. That's all for today. I'll be back with you tomorrow, Thursday. Take care.